Welcome to the Public Housing Repositioning Post-Closing How-To video series. The goal of this video series is to help explain and discuss common issues that occur post-closing during public housing asset repositioning. Each video provides quick guidance to public housing agencies, PHAs, that are new to or unfamiliar with RAD and/or project-based voucher (PBV) program requirements. The videos will help PHAs better understand their asset management and reporting responsibilities post-repositioning and clarify resident rights. The videos provide information to PHAs that have converted their assistance from public housing to voucher assistance as part of repositioning. This video will outline PHA responsibilities once they have closed a RAD PBV transaction. While some videos in this series highlight program features that are applicable to both RAD PBVs and non-RAD PBVs, this video describes requirements only applicable to RAD PBVs. Many PHAs have project-based voucher units and are familiar with the program rules. The PHA is often well-versed with the requirements for running this program. You know how to conduct inspections and calculate tenant rent. After a RAD transaction, many of the units may convert to PBV, but there are some unique rules that apply to these families living in the units at conversion that are different from the traditional PBV program. This video will explore how to treat families that are using PBVs as a result of a RAD transaction. In this video, we will discuss two different requirements as it relates to tenant rent. First, we will cover the RAD PBV requirements for families living in the covered project at the time of conversion. These families live in the unit when it converts from public housing to PBV and are sometimes referred to as grandfathered tenants. Then, we will cover the RAD PBV requirements for all families that move into the PBV unit after the grandfathered family leaves. These families are considered new admissions to the PBV program when they move into the unit. As we compare the two set of rules, we will review 5 major aspects. These include 1. Zero HAP provisions, or what happens to the family when they reach zero HAP. 2. Underoccupied units. 3. Rent phase-in and when it applies. 4. Rescreening criteria and when it applies. 5. And how EID waivers are applied. Life cycle of a RAD PBV unit and its tenants. First, we will start with an overview of what happens to the families who live in a RAD PBV unit. We start with our unit. In this example, we have Unit 101. This unit is located in a public housing property and a family resides in it. Next, the RAD conversion takes place at the property. This means that Unit 101 is transferred from public housing funding to RAD PBV funding. The family that lives in Unit 101 at the time of conversion is considered a grandfathered tenant. There are special rules that apply to this family that combine some of the previous public housing program rules with project-based voucher rules. For the sake of this example, we will assume the family moves out of Unit 101 after some time and a new family moves in. The family that moves into Unit 101 after the original family moves out will have to comply with all of the traditional RAD PBV program rules. Then, perhaps a couple of years later, this family moves out and a new family moves into Unit 101. Same as with the previous family, all of the traditional RAD PBV program rules also apply to this family. Now that we have this overview of the life cycle of a RAD PBV unit, we're going to take a closer look at the rules that apply to families at the time of RAD conversion. RAD PBV for families at the time of conversion. The families who live in the units that are part of the RAD conversion and move from public housing to PBV are considered grandfathered tenants. There are certain unique alternative requirements that apply to these families, meant to ease the transition between public housing and PBV. Moving from the public housing platform to the voucher platform is a big change, and HUD wants to be sure families have housing continuity. Now we will review 5 aspects about the family's rent and unit at the time of conversion. First, the family living in the unit when conversion takes place pays the total tenant payment, or TTP, or may be subject to a rent phase-in. We go into more detail on rent phase-in later on. During any period in which the family's TTP exceeds gross rent, the family pays its utility costs and pays toward rent the lower of TTP UA or any applicable maximum rent under the LIHTC regulations. The family living in the unit at conversion can be 0 HAP at admission. This means the household is paying the full rent amount and the housing authority does not have to contribute towards rent because the family is able to cover the full cost. Units where the family is paying 0 HAP are never removed from the contract for being 0 HAP. If a family is in an under-occupied unit at the time of conversion, they may remain in this unit until an appropriate sized unit becomes available in the covered project. When an appropriate sized unit becomes available in the covered project, the family living in the under-occupied unit must move to the appropriate sized unit within a reasonable period of time. If needed, a rent phase-in applies, and families will have up to 3 or 5 years to phase into the new rent payment. The family is not subject to rescreening at the time of conversion admission, including income targeting. And the Earned Income Disregard, or EID, waiver also applies to original families receiving EID at the time of conversion. This means grandfathered families who were receiving the EID at the time of conversion continue to receive it until the time it would normally have expired if the family were in public housing. If the grandfathered family is receiving the Jobs Plus Earned Income Disregard, JPEID, it also continues until it normally would have expired. RAD PBV for new admissions. When the original family moves out of the unit, which is likely to happen at some point, the rules that govern all subsequent families that move into that unit are a little different than those that apply to the grandfathered family. Unlike grandfathered families, new admissions are generally subject to regular PBV program rules on screening, rent, and unit size. Now we will take a look at the same 5 aspects and see how they apply to new admission families. First, the new admission family will pay TTP until the TTP is equal to or greater than the contract rent. Once the TTP goes to 0 HAP, the unit is removed from the HAP contract after 6 months. Per the RAD notice, PHAs must remove the unit from the HAP contract when no assistance has been paid for 6 months. The new admission family cannot be 0 HAP at the time of admission. New admission families cannot be admitted into an under-occupied unit. The family must enter a unit that is appropriately sized for their family composition. Families must start paying full tenant rent and do not have a rent phase-in period. All the typical new admission screening and income targeting policies apply, and the EID waiver does not apply to new admissions. Comparison. Now we will do a quick side-by-side comparison of the 5 aspects. Grandfathered families may begin participation in the PBV program when their TTPs exceed the gross rent. The PHA pays 0 HAP, whereas new admission families cannot, unless a waiver is requested and approved. Grandfathered RAD family units are never removed from the HAP contract for being 0 HAP, whereas new admission families would be removed from the HAP contract after 6 months of 0 HAP. A family living in an under-occupied unit at the time of conversion may remain there until an appropriate-sized unit becomes available in the covered project. By contrast, a new admission must only be provided an appropriate-sized unit. Grandfathered residents may be eligible for a rent phase-in period of 3 to 5 years, whereas a phase-in period does not apply to new admission residents. Grandfathered residents are not subject to rescreening at the time of conversion and admission, including income targeting, whereas all screening and targeting applies to new admission residents. Lastly, the EID waiver applies to grandfathered families receiving EID or JPEID at the time of conversion and not to new admissions.